D. James Kennedy Ministries presents Truths That Transform.
Socialism does not work. Or does it? Some claim nations like Sweden prove that it does. Find out the truth on today's program.
This is Truths That Transform.
Thanks, Frank.
On the other hand, we in America. God's design for education.
Welcome to Truths That Transform, a viewer-supported program. I am Frank Wright, president of D. James Kennedy Ministries. During this election cycle, we have heard many promises about universal health care and free college tuition. Earlier this year, then presidential candidate Bernie Sanders argued that we should look to countries like Denmark and Sweden and Norway for a vision of an ideal American future. On today's program, we'll look to the Bible for some vital guidance on socialism. And we will see how socialism's promises have worked out in the real world. And as we begin, we examine the claim that socialism has supposedly worked in the so-called Nordic nations of Northern Europe. Our guest today is Dr. Nima Sanandaji, who is the author of Debunking Utopia, Exposing the Myth of Nordic Socialism. Dr. Sanandaji holds a PhD from the Royal Institute of Technology in Sweden and is president of the European Center for Entrepreneurship and Policy Reform. Welcome, sir. We're delighted to have you with us.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you so much. Many on the left in America, the left politically, hold up Nordic-style socialism as an ideal for American political economy as well. You have written that that's, at best, an apples and oranges comparison. How is Nordic socialism different than what's being advocated here in America?
In not only the US, but globally, the idea of socialism was almost dead until the left started saying, you know what? We don't want socialism like North Korea, Venezuela, Soviet Union, all of these miserable failures. No. We want Nordic-style socialism. And suddenly they started to have a case. But as I show, the Nordic success story is about a unique culture, and it relies on, you know what? Free markets. Socialism has not been successful in Nordic countries, and by large, Nordic countries have spent 30 years moving away from socialism. The main reason for the success is they have a unique working ethics. They have perhaps the strongest working ethics in the world. They have a culture about hard work, self-reliance, helping your neighbor. And this historic culture has underpinned their success. And unfortunately, the welfare state has slowly been grinding down the working ethics, grinding down the ethics of personal responsibility. And I should know that I grew up with welfare support in Sweden. So you see how really the system is supposedly help the poor, actually traps families who would otherwise be thriving middle-class families in government dependency. Right. Unfortunately, the welfare state has partially destroyed the Nordic working ethics. Right. And the Nordic countries have a class of socially poor who are dependent on welfare, and welfare dependency is passed from generation to generation. So, but still today, the prosperity of Nordic countries comes from capitalism. No doubt about it. In the Index of Economic Freedom, which is a measure of how much capitalism we have in a country, Denmark has the same score as the United States. How? How can the country with the highest tax in the planet have the same score as the United States? Because in virtually every other way, US has more government involvement in the economy. The Nordics have compensated for high taxes and big government by having free markets in virtually every other area of the economy. And for the past 20, 30 years, every Nordic economy has been moving away from big welfare to smaller welfare, from generous welfare to less generous welfare, from high taxes to lower taxes, from government regulation to freer markets. So, that's the true story of Nordic countries. That's the reality of Nordic countries.
You write in your book, Debunking Utopia, that one of the classical ideas of liberalism is that there should be this equality of outcomes, that people who don't work should have somewhat similar living standard to people who do work, that the government should balance all that out. You had experience with that system. Is that how it in fact worked in Sweden?
It works like this. The government balances out, but then you have the problem of welfare dependency.
Yeah.
And once you get welfare dependency, you have entire communities trapped in public support, which makes them socially poor. Because, if I make you dependent on government money, then you're going to be poor.
Yeah.
So the welfare state actually has both these effects. And, it didn't create equality to begin with.
Right. So if you have personal responsibility and a capitalistic system that enables you to have opportunity, you will naturally see a more equality of outcome because everyone has an opportunity to pursue their best interests.
Yeah. And you see, capitalism creates new possibilities. The new money is created, not just old money. People don't get this. If you get this point, and you'll get this point by looking at the Nordics, you'll understand that economic policy is not just about creating wealth. Economic policy is about creating a society which fosters individual responsibility, which fosters working ethics. You see, culture matters.
Right.
And the culture of hard work, responsibility, high levels of trust, solidarity with your neighbors has been more preserved among Nordic Americans.
Right. I think young people in America, if they were to hear you speak and read your book, might be surprised at what getting the thing they're asking for, democratic socialism, would bring them. Loss of freedom, loss of opportunity, destruction of incentives, destruction of your work ethic.
I think that to understand it, you have to just read about the tens of millions of people socialism has killed. And I'm a moderate guy. I don't exaggerate, but it is. That's the numbers. But really, I think understand their ideas. People don't understand ideas of socialism. What is the goal of socialism? It is to break down the individual responsibility. And that's the goal of Marxism, not just consumerism. That's a goal. Break down the individual, break down the family, break down capitalism, and break down every institution of the social society,
and
civil society, and replace it
with
state. One column, the state.
It's been a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much. Debunking Utopia.
My pleasure.
A great book. I hope it's widely read and you'll receive much success here in America.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. As you've just heard, it is a myth that socialism works in the Nordic countries. God's design is what is really at stake here. Later in this program, you will see some of the real-world consequences of socialism. But first, Dr. Kennedy helps us get a biblical grasp on this issue in this excerpt from his message, The Christian View of Economics.
America is not only the land of the free, it is the land of opportunity. It is a city set on a hill, a city of gold in the eyes of many people. Many in foreign countries think that the streets in America are made of gold and that this is the wealthiest nation in the world. If they can just get here, they can indeed realize their economic dreams. Well, there are those that are working to undermine that as well. It is, I think, not merely coincidental but providential that in 1776, the birth year of this nation, a very significant book was written. It was entitled The Wealth of Nations, the nature and cause of the wealth of nations, actually, and it was, of course, written by the famous Adam Smith. Adam Smith was a professor of moral philosophy at Glasgow University, which was a Puritan university at the time. And here he described what is known as the free enterprise system, or as it's sometimes called, capitalism. And that taking place, being published on the very year the Declaration of Independence was published, America began, of course, having several centuries before that gotten pieces of that from Calvin, who gave us indeed the first glimmers of a free enterprise kind of system. And since all of the Puritans and Pilgrims that came here were followers of Calvin, they already knew a good deal about that. But Adam Smith connected all the dots and gave us a full-fledged system. And so therefore, the age of capitalism is dated by historians from the publication of that book. And so capitalism and America have the same birth date. An interesting thing. But again, there are those that would try to do away with that. In 1948, the Liberal World Council of Churches was formed in Amsterdam, and at the very first meeting, they called upon Christians all over the world to abandon capitalism and adopt socialism. They started Christian social organizations. They called for social justice. And indeed, many churches, the liberal churches, followed in their train and began to proclaim those views and encourage socialism. I have not the slightest objection to any Christians anywhere getting together and deciding to establish a Christian commune and to have all of their property in common and share everything they have. I have no objection to that whatsoever. Now, I will say that I'm not too sanguine about what the results of it are going to be, since it has been tried over and over again and has failed, but that's certainly their prerogative, because you see, that is voluntary. Socialism and communism operate with the sword of the state. And they have generally bankrupted or impoverished most nations where they have been tried. Now, keep in mind, one of the basic tenets, the most primary tenet of socialism and communism, is either that the state owns property and the means of production, or at least it controls them. In fact, the famous Parisian socialist Proudhon is famous for a brief statement that has been repeated millions of times in the writings of socialists, and that is a definition of property. Do you know what property, how it's defined? Property is theft. That's socialism. Property is theft. And you think that you have private property? No, there's no such thing. It belongs to everyone. It is the people's property, and it is owned and cared for them by the state, who somehow or another manages to keep most of it for itself. God realizes that for us to exercise our responsibilities before Him, both of justice and charity, it is essential that we own property. And therefore, God has guarded private property with the flaming sword of His own commandment, "Thou shalt not steal," is a divine guarantee of private property. The socialist says this life is all there is. It's pure materialism, there's nothing more, and therefore if you get your needs met, there's no other reason for existing. No, the Bible is right. Let him that will not work not eat. Many of us might find that to be a harsh statement, but I would submit to you that's the most compassionate statement about economics that has ever been made. It was made by God. Notice it doesn't say, let him who cannot work. Let not him who is not able of working, but let him not him who will not work. Let him not eat. That would do more for the well-being economically of more people than almost anything in the world. And private charity would help more people in more beneficial ways than ever will be done in an ever-increasing socialist state. Now, the Bible teaches the very antithesis of socialism. It teaches that God is the center of our lives and our world, and that we should live according to His teachings.
As Dr. Kennedy shared with us, the Bible nowhere condones state-enforced socialism, and such coercive systems have often resulted in ruin. The fact is, socialism is based on lies, as you'll see in our upcoming special program, 3 Big Lies of Socialism. Here is a special preview.
Russian communist leader Vladimir Lenin, when he founded the USSR, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, ordered 70,000 churches to be destroyed and thousands of priests to be killed. A year after Lenin's death, the Soviets founded the LMG, the League of Militant Godless, to completely eradicate Christianity. But the faith managed to survive and outlive the Soviet Union.
El movimiento revolucionario en cualquier rincón de la tierra.
Cuba also chose socialism, communism, over God-given liberty. Like many Cubans, Rafael Cruz, the father of Ted, initially had high hopes for Castro, only to be sorely disappointed.
In Fidel Castro's Cuba, also they began attacking freedom of religion. For example, soldiers would come into a kindergarten class and they would say to the kids, "All right, kids, close your eyes and pray to God for candy." "Where's the candy?" "No candy." "All right, close your eyes again and pray to Fidel for candy." And while the kids had their eyes closed, very quietly those soldiers would place candy on all the desks. Communism requires that you destroy the concept of God, because government must become your God.
And soon came the notorious Cuban death squads to eliminate many dissenters. But of course, the influence of atheistic communism was not confined to Cuba or Russia.
I was raised as a red diaper baby. My mother was Madeline Murray O'Hare. People know her as being an atheist. But the reality is that at her core, she was a Marxist, a utopianist, in a unique brand of kind of magic thought that comes out of that about how all the world's ills can be fixed by having the right people in charge and having a centrally planned society. And as a result of that, she attempted to defect to the Soviet Union in 1960. That failed. But that led to the removal of prayer and Bible reading from the schools, because it was after that failed attempt that, putting me back in school, she discovered the prayer. I was a socialist right up to getting a job. My mother had difficulty holding down a job, and I think that led to some degree her socialism. She thought that having a job should be a right, that somebody should give her a job because of her superior intellect and education, and that should be it. But she had a personality type that caused her to be fired every 30 days.
Atheists see all of this, first, as being totally subjective and going on only in your little heads, nowhere else. And secondly, we see it basically as simply being silly. We don't hate you. We think you're quite odd.
The case to remove prayer from public schools was brought in my name by my mother. She did not let go of that Marxism until she started to make money off of the free enterprise system of selling her magazines and books.
Despite his upbringing as an atheist, William J. Murray, the plaintiff in one of the key cases against school prayer, later became a staunch Christian, as well as a believer in capitalism and a critic of socialism.
It's against human nature. It's against the laws of God. It's against how we were created by God. So your only solution then is to take it by force, and if they won't surrender, then to kill them.
Critics may ask, but what about more genteel forms of socialism that don't kill an unwilling populace to force its way, such as European socialism? Where does belief in God fit in a nation committed to that form of socialism?
Well, historically, it certainly seems to be that as a country becomes more socialist, it becomes more secular. Now, some would argue that that's it's the chicken and the egg question. Which comes first? You become more secular and then you become more socialist, or you become more socialist and then become more secular. The end result is the government increasingly takes the place of God. The government becomes God, and that's idolatry.
Socialism never is able to maintain stability where the evangelical gospel has very solid foundations and public presence. So there's no accident that socialism in its European experiment came really in the aftermath of a secularization that took place.
And critics note, we've begun to see this trend in America as well.
As secularism replaces faith in America, we become less free and more socialistic. In other words, the government is controlling more things, and things are controlled from the top down rather than the bottom up. That hasn't worked any time in history. It always results in some form of tyranny. And while you think it would unite people, what it does when you begin to force uniformity, you create division.
God does not equal government. Government is not God. God doesn't equal government. What I see in socialism is I see people trying to make government God. Or some would say the nanny state. They'll take care of you.
You know, back during the height of the Cold War, there were some ex-communists who wrote a book. They've been ardently committed to communism, but they saw its failure. They saw the Stalin show trials. They saw the absolute failure of socialism to deliver on its promises. And they wrote a book together, and the title of it says everything. The title of the book was The God That Failed. Genesis 1:28 is our economic manifesto. It's our understanding of our purpose in life. Go, multiply, be fruitful, fill the earth, take dominion over the earth. And that's what we're called to do. Socialism says, no, we are the dominion. And there's such a direct conflict there. You just are looking at a conflict of worldviews that's massive.
Acceptance of socialism in America is increasing in our day, but it's a fundamentally failed system, and it undermines the economic system that has made us one of the most prosperous nations on earth. Furthermore, socialism is founded upon lies, and it seeks to overturn God's design. These are important truths that more people need to understand. And my good friend Jennifer Kennedy Cassidy is here to tell us what you can do to help. Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you, Frank. This year, for the first time in history, a large slice of America embraced a socialist candidate for president. Bernie Sanders promised free college and free health care, pledged to attack the businesses and corporations that employ millions of Americans, and wealth redistribution. He didn't win his party's nomination, not this time anyway, but he showed that a growing number of Americans are primed for socialism, and only the biblical truth will stop its advance. That's why we're putting the finishing touches on our special full-length program, 3 Big Lies of Socialism. And I want to ask for your help to complete and air this program, as well as continuing the other ongoing work of this ministry. If you'll stand with us, we'll send you your own DVD copy of 3 Big Lies of Socialism as soon as it's finished. Simply write to us at D. James Kennedy Ministries, Box 11154, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, 33339. Or call toll-free 877-962-7677. Or go online to djkm.org. This program looks at 3 central lies that open the door for socialism. The lies that there is no God, that you can have something for nothing, and that socialism works. As you've seen today, all of those assertions are false. But those who don't know the truth are lining up to be dupes for this dangerous system. How many times have you heard the claim that socialism works in Scandinavia, so we should try it here too? How often have you seen people line up to vote for someone just because he or she promises free things? You and I cannot let socialism take hold in America. And based on recent events, we only may be one election cycle away from that happening. Please give a generous donation today to help us produce and air this special program and others like it. and we'll send you a DVD copy of 3 Big Lies of Socialism, which will include bonus content that you won't see in the broadcast version. Get a copy for yourself or to share with someone you know who's in danger of buying into the lies of socialism. Simply write to us at D. James Kennedy Ministries, Box 11154, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, 33339, or call toll-free 877-962-7677, or go online to djkm.org.
In this year's primary elections, candidate Bernie Sanders, who is an avowed socialist, attempted to qualify his socialist rhetoric by making a distinction between so-called democratic socialism and its other forms. In one of those countries that Sanders professes to admire, Venezuela, the late President Hugo Chavez also insisted that socialism ought to be democratic. Well, that sounds good until you peel back the layers of deception and look at the reality. In the case of Venezuela, it is self-destructing before our very eyes, just a few short years after the death of its socialistic strongman. And therein we find an important key. While socialism often promises democracy, in reality, it can only exist under the authoritarian hand of the state. Promises of redistribution and of free stuff for everyone can only be kept if those resources are taken from someone else, by force if necessary. At the end of the day, socialism simply does not work. As Margaret Thatcher famously said, the problem with socialism is that you eventually run out of other people's money. In Venezuela, a nation rich in natural resources and having some of the world's largest oil reserves, people are currently rioting over the lack of food and other basic necessities. Many are dying of easily treatable diseases because medicines have run out. While this disaster continues to unfold, we must not forget that this is a man-made disaster, measured in untold human suffering, and all delivered under the lofty promises of democratic socialism by those in pursuit of sheer power. Meanwhile, the richest person in Venezuela is the daughter of, you guessed it, Hugo Chavez. The fact that American celebrities like Bernie Sanders and Sean Penn lauded Hugo Chavez is to their everlasting shame, and we dare not let their likes impose this disastrous, self-serving vision on the United States of America. Dear friends, there is nothing democratic about socialism. I'm Frank Wright. Thanks for joining us on Truths That Transform. Join us next week for the special program, 3 Big Lies of Socialism.
Today's program is available on DVD for your gift to this ministry of any amount. This has been a production of D. James Kennedy Ministries.